Now let's be honest, you're not buying the M3 Ultra Max Studio just to browse the web or check your emails, right? You want to create, push and maybe even break your limits while doing so, like editing 17K B-RAW files, playing AAA games at max settings, or trying to max out the new Thunderbolt 5 speeds with actual hardware. Because if you're spending this much on an M3 Ultra Max Studio, you deserve to know if the performance leap is real. Now before anything, if you want to know the exact specs of this M3 Ultra Max Studio, I will leave it down below. Now from a video editing perspective, while the previous M2 Ultra Max Studio that I had did handle up to 12K resolution both on B-RAW and ProRes files as well, but there were certain plugins that I use on FX Factory that did slow down the Mac to the point that I just gave up on using those plugins. Now since YouTube content creation is not only about the qualities of videos that we do, but also speed as well, so based on my tests, not all but about 90% of the plugins on FX Factory runs smoother now. The other 10%, well, they're probably on vacation because they haven't been optimized properly. Because all of the motion VFX plugins for Final Cut Pro work very well, including the ones which is deemed to be a bit more heavy, so that was really good news as well. But because the rendering speeds are way faster than my previous M2 Ultra Max Studio, so the workaround that I had is just to render the selected plugins that is heavy on Final Cut Pro so I can edit much faster than before. Then as for handling the high resolution 17K B-RAW files, it played very well on DaVinci Resolve whether or not the footage had a brighter or a darker environment. So I intentionally pushed the shadows to make it brighter just to have some noise on the darker areas, where I even added some noise reduction to see how well it performs. And yes, to nobody's surprise, it worked flawlessly and it was super smooth as well. So probably it is time for us to buy a 17K camera then, eh? Now as for gaming, I tested out 4 games. First of all is Cyberpunk 2077, which recently came out for macOS, Baldur's Gate 3 and Hades. Now starting up with the AAA game Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate, while the launch of the game was not the best when it was first released with lots of bugs to a point it was borderline unplayable on any platform, whether or not it's on the Windows or even the Mac as well. Well, the good news is that not only it is all fixed, but it's finally available natively on the Mac too. So with this M3 Ultra's power, I was excited to give it a try. Now the recommended settings from the game developers is to use the default settings for this particular Mac. Well, I tried that and managed to get a steady 60 frames per second where the game looks and runs gorgeously. But I also wanted to see if I could push the game beyond what the developers recommend, just to see what the Mac Studio can truly achieve. So I went with the highest graphical settings, which was setting it to ray tracing to overdrive. And yes, it is not really meant to do that because at these settings, the game didn't run particularly well at 4K resolution, managing about 20 frames per second, but I managed to get about 30 to 40 frames per second when I reduced the resolution to 1440p. However, after reducing it to 1080p at the highest graphic settings, I was running between 40 to 45 frames, which was fine for me. So if you prefer to get a consistent 60 FPS, the sweet spot is to run the game tracing at medium at 1440p, or the ray tracing at ultra but graphics at 1080p. Then I also tested another AAA game, which is Resident Evil Village, and the game ran super well at 4K resolution with the highest graphics preset settings. It ran at a constant 60 frames per second, which is the max frame rate without any dips whatsoever to my surprise. Even during intense action scenes, the game started at a 60 FPS mark, which was really impressive. Then moving on to Baldur's Gate 3, which is one of the best RPG games to come out recently. Well, this game is known to be quite a heavy game to run, so it will be interesting to see how the M3 Ultra tackles this. And turns out it did extremely well, as the game managed to run at a steady 70 to 75 frames per second. With the Ultra settings turned on at full 4K resolution, it did sometimes go up to 60 FPS at certain parts, but only if you enter a new area of the game. But yes, compared to my previous M2 Ultra Max Studio, it is great to know that this particular game ran exceptionally well. Then I tried Hades, and yes, it is the lightest game in the list, but it is a very fun game and it has native macOS support. Now as expected, the game ran like an absolute dream on this Mac Studio, even at 4K resolution. Not once did I encounter any frames to drop below than 60 FPS throughout the whole entire gameplay. So yes, ultimately, this M3 Ultra Max Studio is a very very good machine when it comes to gaming. We just need more developers to release more games natively on the Mac OS to take advantage of Apple's powerful Silicon series chips. Now, if you're enjoying this video so far and finding it helpful, do give this video a nice big thumbs up to tell YouTube that this video was good. And a subscription will be lovely too, so thank you, and thank you very much in advance. Now, since this M3 Ultra Mac Studio comes with a total of 6 Thunderbolt 5 ports, I decided to test it with a Thunderbolt 5 hardware enclosure. So this is from a brand called Acasis, which I got from Amazon. If you want it, links will be down below. But the first test I did was using the Orico Thunderbolt 4 enclosure on my previous Mac Studio's Thunderbolt 4 port to see what the baseline was. And it gave me an average of 388 MB per second write and 2748 MB per second read. And what's interesting is that when I put the same Thunderbolt 4 enclosure on the new Thunderbolt 5 port, the writing speeds were reduced to 148 MB per second, but the read speed did increase a bit to 2800 MB per second. And when I tried the new Thunderbolt 5 enclosure on this new Thunderbolt 5 port, the write speeds jumped to a massive 3810 MB per second, and the read speeds was even higher at 5400 plus MB per second. So yes, this new Thunderbolt 5 combined with the Thunderbolt 5 enclosure is a match made in heaven, making editing directly on this SSD so easily. And just for context, the NVMe SSD used here is the Samsung 980 Pro, and based on my test, or on this particular test, I personally feel that while it is an upgrade, but it's something that you really need to invest, which is a Thunderbolt 5 enclosure, to really tell a difference. But of course, when you do, the difference is between night and day. Now, while you're still here, if you want a written recap of everything mentioned in this video, we do have one at our website at www.adamlobo.tv, where the links to the website will be down below, where we also have some daily tech news over there too. So based on this test, I would say that it is rare that an upgrade feels this noticeable. But if your current Mac or even Windows machine feels like it's gasping for air, this M3 Ultra Mac Studio, it doesn't just solve the problem, it makes you forget that problem ever existed.